November 2016. It is past midnight in Washington, D.C., yet the city refuses to sleep. Inside a dimly lit FBI cyber operations room, monitors glow with streams of code network maps pulsing red like arteries under attack. Agents lean forward in silence, every keystroke echoing like a gunshot in the tense air. Somewhere across the Atlantic, invisible hands are rummaging through America's nervous system, tugging at its most fragile wires. Democracy itself. On another screen, a server belonging to the Democratic National Committee flickers. File names roll past emails, strategy, documents, opposition, research. Tens of thousands of secrets peeled away like skin. The sound of a printer whirs in the background, spitting out page after page, as though the machine itself is panicking. A young analyst swallows hard, her throat dry, her pulse racing. She whispers one word to her superior. "They're in." The agents know what that means. Somewhere, someone hidden behind layers of false identities, proxies, and stolen credentials has broken into the heart of an American election. Outside, the city is quiet, unaware. In campaign headquarters across town, candidates sleep fitfully, blissfully ignorant that their futures are already being rewritten in real time by hands they will never see. The breach isn't about a single candidate or even a single election. It is about trust, about whether democracy itself can be corrupted not by bombs or soldiers, but by code. The kind that slips unseen through firewalls and landslides into inboxes, then detonates in the public eye. Agents trade glances, their faces illuminated by the pale light of their screens. They know that every hour matters now. Somewhere, secrets already moving, leaking, waiting to be unleashed on the world. A fuse has been lit, and when it burns out, it could ignite a storm bigger than anyone can control. But who lit it? And how did Russian spies 3,000 miles away pierce the heart of America's most sacred ritual? To understand how the United States arrived at this moment, its electoral process compromised its citizens, manipulated. We must step back. This was not a crime of passion nor a spontaneous act. It was the culmination of years of evolution in a new kind of warfare. Cyber war. The roots trace back to Moscow. Russia's GRU, the military intelligence agency founded in 1918, had always thrived in shadows. Unlike the KGB, which became infamous for cloak and dagger operations during the Cold War, the GRU preferred to stay invisible. Its agents embedded themselves within global networks of espionage, surveillance, and sabotage. By the early 2000s, as the world digitized, the GRU adapted recruiting hackers, building cyber units, and perfecting the art of digital intrusion. The Kremlin understood something vital. Wars of the future wouldn't only be fought with tanks and missiles. They would be fought with information, with disinformation, with invisible invasions into servers and minds. And so while Western nations debated the ethics of surveillance, Russia built an army of hackers who could destabilize a government with the tap of a key. By 2014, the GRU's hackers had tested their arsenal in Ukraine. Power grids blinked off. Media outlets found their websites hijacked. Military communications collapsed. Each act was a rehearsal, a warning to adversaries that Russia could project power without firing a bullet. In the United States, the warning signs were there. Cyber experts had been sounding alarms for years. Political campaigns were vulnerable. Their servers were soft targets run not by governments, but by staffers juggling emails, schedules, and donors. To a well-trained hacker, these systems were wide-open windows. When the 2016 election season began, America was divided, distracted, and noisy. Candidates sparred in televised debates, campaign rallies roared with slogans, and voters scrolled endlessly through social media feeds. Few realized that in the background, Russian operatives were laying the groundwork for something historic. The manipulation of the world's most powerful democracy, not by persuasion at the ballot box, but by sabotage in cyberspace. And so, as spring turned to summer in 2016, the GRU launched its boldest operation yet. Target: the Democratic National Committee. Objective: steal its secrets, expose them to the world, and watch the chaos unfold. The fuse had been planted. Now, it was only a matter of time before it burned down to the explosion. The hack. Inside the breach of the DNC, it began quietly. In the spring of 2016, just as campaign season was reaching fever pitch, a small group of GRU operatives slipped into the networks of the Democratic National Committee. Their codenames were impersonal, almost clinical: APT-28, Fancy Bear Sophacy. But their mission was anything but sterile. It was surgical. They were to cut into the Democratic Party's digital flesh, extract the lifeblood, and leave the wound gaping for the world to see. The breach started with a single email. A staffer clicked on what looked like a routine password reset request from Google. It was a fake. The link led not to Google's servers, but to the hacker's own phishing trap. Within minutes, credentials were stolen. With one careless click, the gates opened. From there, the attack escalated like a silent infection. Malware was installed deep within the network. Keyloggers recorded every keystroke while custom backdoors siphoned files in steady streams. Thousands of documents were copied, compressed, and shipped off to servers scattered across the globe. The hackers moved carefully, often disguising their activity as normal traffic hiding behind the noise of everyday digital life. By June, the DNC's servers were hemorrhaging secrets. Internal memos, strategy, documents. Emails from campaign staffers. Messages that were never meant to be seen outside the walls of headquarters were now sitting in Russian hands. Some were trivial, petty complaints between staffers. Others far more sensitive debates over strategy vulnerabilities and tensions within the party itself. Inside the DNC, staffers noticed strange glitches. Files missing. Passwords suddenly invalid. IT teams scrambled to patch holes, but by then, it was too late. The infection had spread too far. The attackers had already taken what they needed. And then came the release. In July 2016, just days before the Democratic National Convention, WikiLeaks began publishing tens of thousands of emails. The timing was brutal, strategic, almost theatrical. Like a well-rehearsed act in a political drama, the leaks landed at the exact moment they would cause maximum damage. The content sparked outrage. Emails suggested favoritism within the party's primary process. Staffers' private comments about candidates spilled into the public eye. For the Clinton campaign, it was a nightmare scandal on the eve of their convention. Cracks in unity exposed to the world. Across America, headlines screamed. On television, anchors dissected the leaks line by line. Social media lit up with fury memes, conspiracy theories, and hashtags that spread faster than wildfire. For many voters, it wasn't just about the content of the emails. It was the sense that the system itself was compromised, tainted, rigged. In Moscow, the GRU had achieved its objective. Not only had they stolen secrets, they had detonated them in the heart of American politics. The goal was never just theft. It was chaos, division, distrust. And it worked. But the breach was only the beginning. What came next would transform the leaks into something far more dangerous. A weaponized campaign of disinformation that would ripple through every corner of the internet, rewriting the rules of modern warfare. The disinformation machine. How leaks became weapons. The emails alone were volatile. But in the hands of Russia's cyber operators, they became more than leaks. They became ammunition. Information, after all, is not just about what exists. It's about how it is framed, timed, and amplified. The GRU understood this better than anyone. Once WikiLeaks began publishing the stolen emails, Russian operatives shifted gears. Their job was no longer to steal. It was to shape, to weaponize. The operation fused hacking with psychology. State-backed troll farms like the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg began crafting narratives, planting seeds across the digital landscape. Thousands of fake accounts posing as American citizens, activists, and journalists sprang to life on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. Their avatars smiled with stock photo faces. Their bios were written in clumsy but convincing English. The messages they spread were not always outright lies. Instead, they were distortions, half-truths, exaggerations. They took the raw material of the DNC leaks and twisted them into viral narratives. Proof of corruption, evidence of collusion, signs that the system was broken. In a polarized nation, these stories spread like fire on dry grass. Timing was everything. Each wave of revelations hit at politically sensitive moments. Debates, rallies, conventions. Like precision strikes, they deepened divisions between voters who already distrusted each other. Clinton and supporters saw sabotage. Sanders supporters saw betrayal. Trump supporters saw vindication. Behind the curtain, algorithms did the rest. Facebook's newsfeed prioritized engagement, not truth. Twitter rewarded outrage. Anger, suspicion, and fear rose to the top, drowning out nuance and reason. Millions of Americans scrolled through their phones, consuming weaponized content without ever realizing they were part of someone else's battlefield. For Moscow, it was a masterpiece. With no soldiers on American soil, no missiles fired, they had managed to pierce the heart of America's democracy. The genius was in the subtlety. The manipulation didn't require fabrication on a grand scale. It only required turning Americans against each other, amplifying divisions that were already there. By the fall of 2016, intelligence analysts inside the US were alarmed. They traced activity back to known Russian infrastructure, but proving intent in real time was difficult. By the time evidence mounted, the election was already underway. The cycle of leaks and viral outrage was unstoppable. What the GRU had created was not just a hack. It was an ecosystem of disinformation, an endless feedback loop, where stolen truth mixed with fabricated context, until voters could no longer tell the difference. The battlefield was not land or sea, but perception itself. And perception once shattered is almost impossible to rebuild. The question facing America was no longer just who hacked the election. It was deeper, darker. What happens when a democracy no longer trusts its own reflection? The fallout. Politics, security, and a nation divided. The storm broke in the summer of 2016, but its aftershocks would ripple far beyond election night. For Hillary Clinton's campaign, the leaks were devastating. Every day, headlines dragged the DNC into the mud. Internal rifts once confined to private conversations now played out on national television. Bernie Sanders supporters pointed to the emails as proof that the primary had been rigged. Party unity fractured, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Donald Trump, meanwhile, capitalized on the chaos. At rallies, he pointed to the leaks as evidence of corruption.
"I love WikiLeaks," he declared as crowds roared.
Whether he understood the origin of the material or not, the message resonated. The establishment was rotten. The game was rigged, and he was the outsider, ready to burn it down. Election night delivered the shock. Against almost every prediction, Trump won. For some, it was a victory of populism over politics, as usual. For others, it was the culmination of a foreign plot to reshape the future of the United States. The truth perhaps was a toxic blend of both. But the story did not end with ballots. In Washington, alarms rang louder than ever. U.S. intelligence agencies scrambled to piece together the timeline. Who hacked the DNC? How? And more urgently, could it happen again? By January 2017, the CIA, FBI, and NSA released a joint report with a stunning conclusion: Russia's GRU had interfered in the election with a clear preference for Donald Trump. The fallout was explosive. Partisan battle lines hardened. Some Americans saw undeniable evidence of foreign sabotage. Others dismissed it as a smear campaign, fake news pushed by political enemies. The truth itself became contested terrain. In a way, Russia had achieved the ultimate coup. They had turned fact into opinion, evidence into ideology. Meanwhile, Congress convened hearings. Intelligence chiefs testified under oath about the scope of the attack. The nation learned about spear phishing, malware implants, and troll farms in eerie detail. But for every moment of clarity, there was confusion. Partisan politics infected the investigation, turning the question of election security into another weapon in the culture war. On the streets, the atmosphere shifted. Ordinary Americans began to doubt what they read online. Was that Twitter account a real person or a Russian bot? Was that headline journalism or propaganda? Trust, the invisible currency of democracy, had been hacked. The psychological wound was deeper than the theft of emails. It was the corrosion of certainty itself. If citizens could not trust information, could they trust their votes? If an election's outcome could be swayed by shadows from abroad, what did sovereignty mean? The breach had ended months earlier, but its poison continued to seep silently into the bloodstream of American democracy. The investigation, FBI Mueller, and the hunt for truth. In Washington, the breach of the 2016 election became a wound that refused to close. By early 2017, the FBI was knee-deep in a labyrinth of leads, foreign servers, and shadowy digital footprints. The question was not just who had hacked the DNC. It was whether anyone inside America had helped them. The investigation began with whispers. Contacts between Trump campaign associates and Russian intermediaries raised eyebrows. Meetings in hotel lobbies, cryptic emails, conversations, cloaked in vague promises. To intelligence officials, these weren't coincidences. They were smoke, and smoke suggested fire. The FBI's counterintelligence unit, already strained, launched a probe. It was codenamed Crossfire Hurricane. Soon, agents were poring over phone records, bank transfers, and digital trails. Every breadcrumb led deeper into a maze where espionage met politics. For the first time in history, Americans wondered whether their presidential election had been shaped not just by foreign interference, but by collaboration. Then came the appointment of Robert Mueller. The former FBI director, stoic, meticulous, known for his near-military discipline, was tasked with leading a special counsel investigation. His mandate: uncover the full extent of Russia's election interference and determine whether the Trump campaign had conspired with Moscow. Mueller's team operated like a war room. Dozens of prosecutors, FBI agents, and cyber experts dug into evidence. They subpoenaed documents, interviewed witnesses, and traced IP addresses across oceans. In 2018, they delivered their first thunderclap: indictments against 12 GRU officers for hacking the DNC. Their names were printed in black and white, their operations described in surgical detail. Russia denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The indictment read like a spy thriller. Fake persona servers registered under aliases, cryptocurrency payments to mask trails. Yet the document made something clear: the attack had been state-sponsored. This wasn't rogue hackers freelancing for profit. It was an operation directed by Moscow's intelligence service. As Mueller's work continued, the public narrative grew more polarized. To some, the investigation was the last line of defense for democracy. To others, it was a witch hunt, a political ambush. News outlets dissected every development with feverish intensity. Cable networks filled with pundits arguing over collusion, obstruction, and betrayal. Behind the noise, Mueller remained silent, speaking only through indictments and court filings. His style was deliberate. Facts over theater, evidence over rhetoric. When his final report was released in 2019, it was both conclusive and ambiguous. Yes, Russia had interfered in sweeping and systematic fashion. Yes, members of the Trump campaign had frequent contacts with Russian operatives. But proof of a criminal conspiracy? Not enough. The result satisfied no one. For critics, it confirmed collusion without accountability. For supporters, it was exoneration. For America, it was another fracture line in a nation already split apart. What Mueller's investigation revealed, however, was undeniable. The battlefield had changed forever. Elections were no longer safe behind borders. The enemy did not need bombs or guns to destabilize a superpower. They needed only patience, precision, and the click of a mouse. The global shockwave. Cyber warfare redefined. The Mueller report closed one chapter, but the reverberations were only beginning. The 2016 election interference was not simply a domestic scandal. It was a global earthquake that redefined how nations understood war. For centuries, power was measured in tanks, missiles, and troops. But here was a demonstration that mere strings of characters could rival entire armies. Russia had not fired a single bullet on American soil, yet it had shaken the foundations of the world's most powerful democracy. Across Europe, the alarm spread. In Germany, Angela Merkel warned that foreign disinformation campaigns were attempting to sway public opinion. In France, intelligence services scrambled to defend against similar breaches during Emmanuel Macron's presidential race. In the Baltic states, long accustomed to Russian pressure, officials braced for a new kind of invasion, one that attacked minds, not borders. NATO, founded to defend against tanks rolling across European fields, suddenly confronted a battlefield without geography. Generals who had studied artillery and airstrikes now found themselves discussing phishing emails, botnets, and viral memes. How do you deter an adversary who doesn't march soldiers into your land, but instead floods your citizens' news feeds with lies? How do you retaliate against an attack that leaves no smoking crater, only confusion? The term hybrid warfare gained currency. The fusion of cyber attacks, disinformation, and psychological operations to destabilize societies from within. Moscow had proven its mastery of it, and others were watching. China, Iran, North Korea all began to refine their cyber capabilities, noting how cheaply and effectively Russia had unsettled its rival. In Washington, policymakers scrambled. Congressional hearings called tech executives to testify. Mark Zuckerberg, face pale under harsh lights, explained how Facebook had unwittingly hosted thousands of Russian fake accounts. Twitter pledged to purge bots. Google promised transparency. But the deeper question lingered. Could private companies be trusted to defend democracy, or were they already too entangled in the economics of outrage? For ordinary citizens, the battlefield was everywhere and nowhere. The phone in their pocket, the feed they scrolled before bed, the news clip their uncle shared at dinner. Reality itself became contested, filtered through algorithms designed for engagement, not truth. Russia's attack was never just about electing one man. It was about showing the world that democracy could be hacked, that open societies built on trust and debate were uniquely vulnerable to manipulation. And by proving it in America, Moscow had sent a chilling message to every capital. Your citizens are not just voters, they are targets. The world had entered a new era. Invisible wars fought in silence without borders. And yet, for all the warnings, one haunting question remained. Had anyone truly learned the lesson of 2016? Or was the fuse still burning, waiting for the next explosion? The legacy. Trust democracy and the fragile future. By the time the dust settled, America was a different country. Not because tanks had rolled down Pennsylvania Avenue, or because bombs had fallen on its cities, but because something more subtle, more insidious, had been taken. Certainty. Trust, the oxygen of democracy, was poisoned. In living rooms and coffee shops, at rallies and on cable news, Americans argued not just about policies or candidates, but about reality itself.
Was the election fair?
Was the media lying? Were their neighbors being manipulated? For millions, every headline, every tweet, every breaking news alert carried the faint echo of Russian interference. The damage was psychological, and it lingered long after the ballots were counted. A system designed on faith that elections are free, that institutions are neutral, that facts are shared, was suddenly brittle. When truth became subjective, democracy felt like a house standing on cracked glass. Yet amid the fracture, there was also clarity. Intelligence agencies once viewed as relics of the Cold War were forced into a new mission, defending elections from digital sabotage. Cybersecurity budgets ballooned. Campaigns began training staffers to spot phishing emails as if they were soldiers learning battlefield drills. Social media companies rolled out tools to detect coordinated disinformation, though often too little too late. But the greater challenge lay beyond firewalls. It was cultural. How do you inoculate a population against manipulation when outrage is addictive, when algorithms reward anger, when lies travel faster than truth? There was no patch for human vulnerability, no update for cognitive bias. The battlefield was inside people's minds, and there was no easy defense. Internationally, the interference left scars. Allies looked at Washington and wondered, if the United States, the richest, most technologically advanced nation in history, could be hacked so easily, what chance did smaller democracies have? The sense of invincibility that once surrounded America dimmed. Russia, with a fraction of the West's resources, had pulled off a geopolitical magic trick, undermining a superpower with nothing more than stolen emails and viral propaganda. The legacy of 2016 was not one election but a warning that the wars of tomorrow would not always be visible, that a tweet could be as destabilizing as a missile. That democracy, for all its strength, was built on something delicate: trust. And once trust is broken, who can restore it? The story of how Russian spies hacked the US election is not just history, it is prophecy. A reminder that the battlefield is already here. Inside the networks we rely on, the feeds. We scroll the conversations we believe are private. The question is no longer if it will happen again. The question is, when it does, will we recognize it in time?